December 13, one day after Borussia Dortmund were bitterly beaten 5-1 by promoted side VfB Stuttgart on home soil, a team built by former chief scout Sven Mislintat, who was cast aside after falling out with Thomas Tuchel, Peter Bosz jumped to first place in the Bundesliga with Bayer Leverkusen. Earlier that fateful Sunday afternoon, Dortmund announced the sacking of head coach Lucien Favre. Quote, "We felt we were in danger of not achieving our objectives for the season after this difficult phase. That's why we had to take action," unquote, said BVB sporting director Michael Zorc in the official press release. The difficult phase? One win out of the last 5 league games, including 3 consecutive home losses against FC Bayern, 1. FC Köln and VfB Stuttgart. A draw away to Eintracht Frankfurt and a win of Champions League Group F happened in between the drop out of the top 4 Bundesliga spots. Now, the Black and Yellows want to ensure to reach their season goals with 38-year-old interim coach Edin Terzic. Watzke and Zorc have trusted their legacy with a young assistant coach after Favre and his number 2 Manfred Steffes were relieved of their duties. Was it the right call to let Favre go? Is Terzic the guy to lead BVB to a top 4 finish in the Bundesliga and take on Sevilla in the Champions League? And who may come in next to pick up the pieces in the summer? I'm Stefan Butzko and this is episode 350 of the Yellowwallpod, and to answer these questions and more joins me Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I feel very, very relaxed now after that little cool jazz episode. I feel like there's going to be some spoken word poetry now, but that was the perfect intro because it kind of chilled me out. How are you doing, Stefan?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. It was something else, but I thought for episode 350 we need to do something special, but I wasn't quite sure what. I'm not entirely sure whether that's cringy or not, but for more evaluation on whether that was good or not, also joins us Lars Pollmann. Hello, Lars. How are you doing?
Hello, Stefan. I'm doing fine, and that was quite snazzy, I would say.
Well, I don't know if that's a compliment or not, because I don't know what the word snazzy means. Pardon my ignorance, and let's just, I guess, move on with it, because we do have a lot of things to discuss and we do not have that much time. So on Saturday, Dortmund were horribly beaten 5-1, as I've already alluded to in that snazzy intro. Matthias, was it the right call to sack Favre after this display?
Well, you know, it kind of felt like it had to, because it was just Dortmund were missing everything and everywhere, it seemed, and it just. And it's not just that one match. I mean, if you look at the last few matches and then obviously going through similar phases in the last 2 years, but now then to be just that outplayed, out-tacticked and coach, and the players just seemingly not into it because there were so many bad passes all the time to a degree that I'm just not used to with the Dortmund side for years. It felt like they kind of had to. The match forced their hand. I don't think they really wanted to at the end of the day. I think if they would have gotten a draw out of it or narrowly beaten or narrowly beat Stuttgart, maybe they would have persisted at least into the 2-second winter break. But as things stand right now, they had to do something because something was not clicking with the team. And when you listen to some of the post-match comments from some of the players, it just seemed like it was at a time now where a change had to be made.
Yeah, Lars, I think Dortmund's officials were rather reluctant to let Favre go. They made sure to underscore after they fired him that he did great work, but they also felt that they needed to make a change. The season goals were in danger all of a sudden. Lars, you, I think, tweeted that at least you need to entertain the thought of letting Favre go after the 5-1 loss to Stuttgart. What do you think? Do you think this was the right call?
First of all, snazzy is a positive. Let one German
I just
tell
Googled
another
it.
German.
It means stylish and attractive. Example, snazzy little silk dresses.
Yeah, and that was the kleine Schwarze of jazz intros, I would say. As for the dismissal of Favre, yeah, I mean, I think I said or tweeted it would border on negligence not to at least strongly consider it. And basically what I was meaning with that was what you quoted Zorc in saying, the sporting goals for this season were definitely in danger if this current run of form, which I wouldn't only relate to the 1-5 against Stuttgart. If that continues too long, I mean, the Bundesliga this season is quite equalized at the top, I would say. Even Bayern haven't won, I think, 4 games out of 11, or it might even be 5 now. Leipzig, Leverkusen are much stronger, more solid than last season, so there's not much breathing space for Dortmund to have like an extended autumnal depression as they had last season and still easily finished in second. So I think this was the kind of situation that was untenable because of the development over the last few weeks and months. And certainly also, I think what was quite telling, and you alluded to it earlier, the comments of players one step short of mutiny, I would say. And there was certainly a lot of finger pointing. You know, I think basically the two leaders of the attacking department and the defensive department, if we want to think in those terms, Mats Hummels and Marco Reus basically pointed the finger at the other department, if you like. So whenever that happens, basically it boils down to the head coach not having the full trust of his team anymore, the team not being, you know, fully happy with decisions and tactics applied. So ultimately, I think this was inevitable, but still on Saturday evening, I wouldn't have necessarily bet on it happening just because of, you know, schedule congestion and it being really hard to bring someone in mid-season, especially this year. But obviously they kind of cut out the middleman, if you like, and went with an assistant coach who's been around the team, but who it's now been reported on Monday by Kicker, for example, that he definitely has ideas that run a bit counter to what Favre implemented over the last, let's say, 18 months, because I think we should not forget that Favre's first season was really good, and certainly the first half season they kind of ran away with the Bundesliga. Obviously they didn't finish the job against Kovac Bayern, which is arguably a blip on his record at Dortmund, but still we shouldn't be too excited about a good man losing his job, because he certainly did a decent enough job at Dortmund for at least the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, I'm very far removed from gleefully rubbing my hands here that Lucien Favre was sacked, because I think, first of all, he's just a very likable guy, and I do still think that he's a very good football coach. I always said, and I always felt that he is not the perfect fit for Borussia Dortmund. I think everyone knew that this is sort of a compromise. And we've talked a lot about the bigger picture of what Dortmund want and what their philosophy should be, that they sort of enact from the very top and then hire coaches and players accordingly. And in that term, it was always a bit of a head scratcher. I mean, it made sense in the context of what happened before, because Dortmund were at the back of the Bosch/Stöger season, and before that it was a very difficult time with Thomas Tuchel in the end, and obviously the ramifications of the bombing of the team bus. So when Lucien Favre came in and really rocked the Hinrunde, and I think this is sort of where Dortmund almost peaked under him. I think they finished the Hinrunde with a 9-point lead over Bayern, if I remember correctly. So that was really good, and I thought a very refreshing football, and you thought he would stabilize the team, and in many ways I would even say he did. If you listen to our episode right after the Bruges game, I was actually raving about how Dortmund have found some consistency at long last, and exactly when I said that, when the words escaped my mouth, is exactly when shit hit the fan. So if I'm the one at fault, I apologize. But yeah, Matthias, so before we talk about Terzic, maybe in the bigger picture, what do you think can we make out of the Favre era at Dortmund, the 2.5 years of a coach that had the highest points per game on average, 2.09, but quarterfinals per game equals 0. What do you make of this era?
Well, obviously anybody that follows me on Twitter saw that there were a few debates over the course of the weekend. I vehemently reject any notion that Lucien Favre is not an excellent coach. He's a very good coach. And the development of Dortmund under his tutelage showed as much. I mean, after, let's say, the second Tuchel season and then the season of the two Peters, you know, the club were rebuilding a lot. There was, again, been turnover of key players. And, you know, they said it's going to take some while for Dortmund to be challenging Bayern, to be challenging for titles. That was the directive given at the time. And Lucien Favre changed that trajectory dramatically by improving Dortmund, by bringing back morale, by being more tactically astute than his immediate predecessor, Peter Stöger, when it comes to what could excite the players and the fans alike. But the problem at the end of it was that even though he developed Dortmund to that next step, or regaining a step, because they are in his tenure, you know, the Bayern challenger, they've proven that 2 straight seasons. To go that next step, I had always questioned whether he was the right guy, because he'd never coached a team that's on the front foot, in the sense of always coaching a team that was the underdog. I mean, look at the amazing job he did at Borussia Mönchengladbach. And of course, his time there got tainted by the fact that he quit on them when things were pretty bad. That all being said, I think overall we can be thankful that he came and stabilized things, also with his personality and who he was. Very calm, very cordial and friendly and likable and nice. You know, there was no, you know, oddity about him. There was no edge, like Thomas Tuchel, who was genuinely and generally quite disliked by a lot of people. Whereas I would struggle that you find many that have anything bad to say about Lucien Favre. Even at Gladbach, even after he left the way he did. So, as such, I'm very thankful that he came. I think he was the right person at the time to do what he did. But for Dortmund to really take that next step, you need a coach that's willing to risk it a little bit more, to push the envelope a little bit more, and to get more out of the players in an emotional sense, not just in a player development sense. You know, and that's kind of an area that I felt was a little bit missing, and it's kind of been shown this season. Some players have kind of checked out. I'd argue Jadon Sancho has kind of checked out. But at the same time, he also helped young players step forward and play better and gain confidence. So overall, I would say very, very good that he was there, very thankful that he was there. And now it's time to see Dortmund go to that next step and not just challenge for titles, because it's kind of been doing that the last 2 seasons, but really feel like to at least the last second of the last game, you're in it. And I feel like that's where this next step needs to go.
Lars, what do you think Lucien Favre was lacking to keep his job for the end of the term? And beyond that, do you think it was a mistake by Dortmund to have him enter this season as a lame duck coach and B, now make Terzic the guy for the rest of the season? So definitively in their press statement.
Let me answer the second part first, because that's the easiest to answer. I think it was definitely not the wrong call to go with him as a lame duck in terms of, you know, not extending his contract. I would argue that the biggest mistake they made was actually signing him to an extension after the first season petered out in the second half. I mean, obviously they were quite close to Bayern, and actually the title was decided on the final match day. But I mean, if we remember back to the game against Bremen, for example, in late that season, you know, the title was basically decided before, and you know, they had thrown it away in a sense. So I think they prematurely signed him to a contract extension, and we talked about it a lot, especially this season, that, you know, they don't like going with a lame duck situation, and that's why they signed him to an extension. But I didn't think at the time that he merited it, and kind of been proven right now, because they've gone not even 6 months into his final contract or final year of contract, and he's gone now. So that was kind of, you know, a predictable in a way mistake, but, you know, that's what kind of happens sometimes. What does he lack? I think an idea how to develop this team from, a stable base level to greater things. I think he was the perfect person, first and foremost, and in a secondary sense also a very good coach for what they needed at the time. But he was, let's go with a car analogy, he was the kind of guy who got them off the parking spot and during or across the street, but now that they need to go on the autobahn, he didn't find the final gears. So I think he just doesn't really have the kind of idea to bring a team forward with the kind of talent they have at this point. The laborious, deliberate approach and build up has caught them time and time again. I think some of the decision making or lack of decisions has hurt them. So I think I'm struggling. I mean, we said now numerous times that he's a really good coach, but I still kind of struggle to see where he goes next, because there's not a lot of clubs that his philosophy in which he's fairly set. I don't see many opportunities for him to make that work. So I kind of think he should go into national team coaching, which is also a bit more of a hands-off approach, which I think his personality would be well suited to. And then finally, Terzic. I mean, it's ultimately almost impossible for us to really have a sense of what he will be as a head coach, because he's never been a head coach, certainly not at the pro level. I don't think he was a head coach in the youth level. But, they know him very well. He's been around the club since 2010 with, as he said, a short break, which was actually like 5 years. But, I mean, that's splitting hairs in a way. He's a Dortmund fan. He's definitely a more excitable and emotional guy than Favre. And I mean, we know this team has a lot of talent. They have shown even this season glimpses of brilliance in some games. And to unlock that, I think we need to look more at the personal side than, is he a tactical magician? Probably not. I mean, if you're a 38-year-old assistant coach, I mean, you would presume that he'd have gotten his shot as the head guy at some point if he were a prodigal, coaching talent. So I'm thinking more in the sense of they wanted him as a personality, and I think it certainly makes sense to go with someone who knows the squad very well, because you don't have time to get to know a team. I mean, if there was a winter break this season, I'm sure that A, they wouldn't have fired Favre 3 games ahead of the winter break, and B, I'm pretty sure they would have at least looked at someone else. But given the situation as it is, and their lack of breathing space in terms of finishing in the top 4, which is absolutely paramount in COVID times due to financial constrictions, they had to go with someone who knows the squad very well, who knows the characters and the inner workings of this team in particular. So even though I was one of the drivers of the Enrico Maaßen hype train, I kind of get why they go with Edin Terzic, who I will say in his first press conference made a solid impression, but I would say also that not being Lucien Favre in a press conference was always going to make him a winner.
Yeah, the bar when it comes to Dortmund press conference was frighteningly low. Now, Matthias, in that same press conference, Michael Zorc said, and Lars already alluded to it, that he is sort of hoping on more of an emotional approach, that Terzic will bring more emotion that are required at Dortmund, I think Zorc put it. So do you think that this is sort of the main thing you can change in such a short time, considering you won't have a winter break or a training camp in Marbella, and the next game is literally Tuesday, so tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a big deal. I mean, you also look at the fact that he's got Otto Addo at his side, who was I forget what the term is, like...
Top talent coach, I guess.
Top talent coach, whatever the hell that means. I mean, that's kind of like, we've got a throw-in coach. Okay,
well,
congratulations.
It sort of means you look at your best young players like
Yes.
Bellingham and Gio Reyna, and then you show them how to take down the
Correct.
ball with your left foot and finish it with the right outside of the boot. This is sort of what he did. It's like extra training for the Hochbegabten, for the highly skilled young guys. So this is what he did. So he was mostly working with young players to improve their skills and other facets of their game.
And it makes sense to have him more present, also because he's a nice guy. He understands Dortmund, and he understands a lot of these young players that are now part of this Dortmund squad.
Yeah, we should maybe add, for people who are very new to Dortmund, Otto Addo played for the Black and Yellows between 1990 and 2005. So he won one championship with the Black and Yellows.
Yes, and always highly respected, very liked. I would also strongly assume, now also the under-17 head coach is also now an assistant on Terzic's staff, though the question is it really Terzic's staff? I would also strongly assume that there's going to be a stronger involvement from Sebastian Kehl. I would be shocked if Matthias Sammer didn't play some type of role in there as well. I mean, he's a resource that actually won a title with Dortmund and helped Dortmund get out of a crisis at a given time. So there's a lot of experience there along with the youth, and I think that's a key thing. The what you talk about, the emotion, when you watch the press conference, and Terzic is a local guy born in the Sauerland. I forget if he said 30 minutes or 30 kilometers away from Dortmund.
I think it was 30 kilometers, but I'm not sure if you reach the Sauerland,
it's close. It's close. And yeah, he's more emotional. He was an assistant under Slaven Bilic, who obviously is a very emotional guy. And that might be exactly what you need. I mean, I always kind of jokingly said that Lucien Favre reminded me of my now late father-in-law, in the sense of very calm, very fatherly type of demeanor.
And my assumption also very Swiss.
Yeah, and yes, very Swiss. I think that's all good, but now a lot of these young players need that next thing, need an occasional kick in the ass, need someone that speaks their language, that is connected with them. And that's also a lot of what I read in the last 24 hours about Terzic, is that connection.
Yeah, after the laptop coach, see the PlayStation coach. Because I read today that he played PlayStation tournaments with teammates back in the day. So which goes to show he isn't that old. And if you're a gamer, then you obviously maybe have a little bit of a different approach to young players and have maybe a way to connect there, even though I doubt that he ever played Fortnite. But yeah.
No, but I mean, even if you played FIFA with them, you've connected with these players on a different level that if you were just the head coach, you never would have. You can't, because there needs to be a distance. Even Jürgen Klopp talked about it. If you watch the documentary from 2012, Trainer, where he said, I come into the room, even though I have a good relationship with my players, everyone stops talking because the boss is in the room. It's not like they talk about, hey, coach, this is what I did this weekend. And obviously Terzic had that relationship a little bit more with the players, which has now changed, but it's still there. Now, when it comes to tactics, he spoke about it a little bit. He'd rather score one goal more than concede one less. He obviously spoke of the Dortmund DNA, also as far as maybe wanting to be a more intense, higher pressing, aggressive side, which I think speaks to a lot of the skill sets from certain players. And may excite them again and get them moving forward again. And so I think he's saying all the right things. Whether or not it's the right move or not, we'll only know that in probably the next 5 to 10 matches. It's way too early to speculate on that. Even Florian Kohfeldt said today that, this changes everything, because he knows nothing about Edin Terzic, and needs to gather information, because his tactical approach for Bremen ahead of Dortmund tomorrow is now completely gone out the window, because it's a different Dortmund side. And in terms of being able to convey tactics, you have a very tactically astute group of players, even some of the young ones, but the more mature ones that have been there for a while, be it a Hummels, a Witzel, a Can, a Delaney, a Brandt, a Guerrero, a Reus, Hazard, they understand it, and you're talking about nuances at that point. So I think, we'll have to wait and see, but I do expect more energy. And so I understand why they made this decision from an emotional standpoint, because that was something that was oft criticized, especially in the last few matches, that Dortmund the players seemed just not engaged.
Yeah, you said you do expect more energy. I am hoping for more energy, but I don't know if I can expect this, because due to the schedule congestion and seeing other sides struggle right now, like for example Bayern, I see them gain a point against Union Berlin, which was not very deserved because they look completely gassed. And Union Berlin really should have steamrolled them, to be honest. And Stuttgart, I think, also did profit from the lack of freshness that Dortmund have. Jude Bellingham obviously was maybe a bit inexperienced ahead of the 2-1 that Dortmund conceded when he attempted a 1-2 pass with, I think it was Guerrero, at the edge of his own box. However, I think Dortmund right now are not the side that can fire on all cylinders. So, Lars, the first thing I did that Terzic said or tried to convey at the news conference today is that he is also sorry for the 5-1 loss, and that he takes responsibility of it because he was obviously part of that coaching staff. So, if you read the papers and what he's been described as, then it's someone who is a good scout, who can analyze opponents very well. But how much do you expect to actually change within those couple of days? Sunday was sort of just a recuperation / rest day, and today is the final team training. So Matthias already said you want to you want energy levels to change, but beyond that, what do you think can be achieved on Tuesday and in the 3 games before Christmas?
Yeah, that's the big question. I think this is going to be more about attitude and, mindset, which they talked about quite a bit today, than, necessarily a tactical wrinkle they'll throw in, because obviously you don't have the opportunity to train anything of real interest. A final training session, you probably talk about specific stuff to Bremen, maybe set piece defending and all that stuff, if that's even part of the actual on-field training at this stage. They've so many matches already this season, and I think at least 26 until the end of the season, so without a real winter break. It's going to be coming down to how they approach the game against Bremen, then also at Union and Braunschweig in the Cup. I'm expecting a couple of personnel changes, but really the biggest change should be how they approach the game in terms of their mindset. And in that sense, I think a coaching change is always also, taking away some excuses from players. Mats Hummels and Marco Reus can talk a great game after playing like absolute dog shit for 90 minutes against Stuttgart themselves. Marco Reus looks absolutely dead on his legs, and you want to take him to the glue factory. And Mats Hummels made huge mistakes in front of goal, ahead of the goals himself. It's not like they held the band together and the young guys made the mistakes. No, it was the absolute leaders of the team also letting the team down. So there's no more excuse for anyone on the team. They got their presumable wish, not a new head coach, a new approach in terms of how the coach talks to the team, how maybe they come to decisions, how they approach games tactically. So I think when Pep Guardiola left Bayern and they got Carlo Ancelotti, was it Mehmet Scholl who said the shackles are off the
Yes.
team, and they suddenly played with more freedom, meaning they weren't
unchained. I remember he had a good phase for like a couple of months, and then everything fell apart again. So
yeah, obviously when things fall apart for Bayern, it still means Ancelotti wins the double in his first season, but I think I'm fairly optimistic, which might shock some people on episode 350, that I'm the optimistic one about something. But, you know, a coaching change is always a chance for a fresh start. And with a couple of personnel decisions going a different way than before, you know, maybe they change something after 45 absolute god-awful minutes instead of hoping that miraculously they will change themselves. And maybe, you know, the second striker you've been talking about for months, even before he was eligible to play, actually plays more than 5 minutes in a game that, you know, is quite important. You know,
yes, Lars, air all your grievances. Come on, let it all out.
I'm assuming, I was quite finished actually, assuming that things are going to be better, but obviously with the small amount of time available for them on the training pitch, you know, it might be a bit of a work in progress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, there are not too many things I would criticize about Lucien Favre overall. But I do think that his, you know, substituting was not the greatest at times. I think I made the same criticisms leveled them at Peter Busch, for example, and I don't even remember the Stuttgart time at all. So, but yeah, I do think that he is too reluctant to pull the trigger on something. But I mean, there were phases this season where it improved, where he actually made changes at halftime, which weren't just out of necessity due to injury or so, but actual tactical changes where you know, one awful 45 minutes of a player or so were already enough to make a change. And so that criticism is a little bit cushioned by that, I guess. But yeah, in the recent games, I always thought, oh my God, why are we looking at this for 70 minutes, or the game in Frankfurt where you make 2 substitutions overall? So Matthias, Lars already just said it, the alibi is revoked. And if we look at how this Dortmund team fell apart after the 2-1 against Stuttgart, where there was very little fight, what do we expect now also from the guys like Witsel, Hummels and Reus, who definitely are the veterans and of whom is some more expected than they're all showing right now, especially Reus and Witsel, who are gravely out of form.
Well, I mean, ideally quit fucking up. I mean, that would be a good start, I think. You know, I had this whole, until Favre got sacked, I had this whole rant already planned out. I probably ranted in my head 20 times over the course of the weekend. But, you know, I will give, of all of those, I will give Reus a mini pass just because he was kind of played in position that we all know it's not kind of his thing. But still, there needs to be significantly more. Of the front players, though, I will say he did actually press on occasion. Sancho just seemed to just stop wanting to play. But Witsel needs to be more than a ball shuttler. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't see a point to him playing.
I've heard him be described as a poor Julian Weigl at the moment.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's and maybe he's taller than Julian Weigl, but that may just be the hair. But it was kind of one of those matches where after 20 minutes, you're like, hey, let's bring on De Hout. And maybe De Hout will get a chance now. That was, to me, is like the big baffling part of this season. You know, I've been critical of him. I believe 100% justifiably so. And this season, I've seen the De Hout I always wanted to see. And after he starts playing really well, he doesn't play anymore. What the fuck, man? It's what is he going to have to do? I think last it was you who tweeted the conspiracy theory against Mahmoud Dahoud continues when he was taken off and Moukoko was brought on in one match. It's like, what's the guy got to do? But also Guerrero was atrocious in that match. I mean, he was so bad. He was a complete liability and should have been taken off, but he was not. And there are certain players I felt bad for in the side. Bellingham would be one. Reina would be one just because they're kids and you just can't put that pressure on them. Morey, I feel bad for him, but he was also really bad in the match. I felt bad, honestly, for Bürki and Akanji, because especially Bürki, who actually had a pretty good day. If it wasn't for him, oh God. Who knows where this scoreline would have ended. But it just, there are so many players that should be so much better that completely failed Dortmund. And I'll be honest, watching that match, I had to think of the Zenit match where Dortmund were lucky to have won. I mean, let's be honest, if it wasn't for Zenit being completely incapable in front of goal, and Bürki playing well, that they should have lost that match. And definitely not won it. So the warning shots were there and nobody freaking listened. And it just, and granted, it was way more of a somehow thrown together side, but still it was there. You saw it. You saw the warning signs and nobody did anything. And I think that's also what ultimately led to Favre being out. But now, yeah, buck up, boys, and get this shit done, because we can't have this, and you're just not good enough or young enough for Dortmund to go, for Zorc and Watzke to go, yeah, maybe you're just not that untouchable anymore. So now it's put up or shut up time for those veteran players, not the young guys. I don't blame them.
Yeah, so now Dortmund on Tuesday do face Werder Bremen, who are sitting in 13th place, and I don't think they have won their last 5 matches. So
8 matches.
8, yeah. See, so they are also not really in form. Lars, what do you expect of this Werder Bremen team, where Dortmund have struggled a couple of times when they traveled there?
I mean, that was the Favre curse, which now has been lifted, obviously.
Right.
I mean, I don't necessarily follow Bremen too closely for... That was my smartphone. For several reasons. One of which being I'm not a masochist, and Bremen, while a great tradition, or a club with great tradition, haven't really been up to par for years now. I think there was kind of a Kofeld mirage for a while. Last year they should have been relegated. I mean, they only stayed in the Bundesliga because of the away goal rule in the relegation playoffs, which is ridiculous considering there were no fans in the stands for both games. So, I mean, the away goal rule is always dumb, but it was especially dumb in that part. And this season, I mean, they started decently enough. They had this crazy run of 1 all draws. I think it was 6 or 7 in a row, something like that. They even got a deserved point at Bayern, after which they were kind of disappointed in not nicking it at the end. I think Josh Sargent had a pretty decent chance late in the game. But, since then they've lost, I think, 3 games in a row. And reading about them, it seems that they've completely fallen back into the problems they had last season, inexplicable defensive lapses, no real threat in front of goal. I think they still kind of miss Milo Rashica, who's been injured. I think he's back healthy, but not really firing all cylinders, which really has been the case for the entire calendar year. I mean, this is the kind of game where all things being equal, Dortmund would be expected to win quite easily, but obviously things aren't ever really, or things equal when Dortmund are concerned, and certainly not when a coaching change is involved. So it's very interesting to see how these teams shape up against each other, because obviously, and you guys mentioned it before, Kofeld doesn't know the first thing about Terzic. I think nobody really knows much about Terzic here in Germany. He also made his coaching license. He doesn't have the Fußballlehrer, which is the German top license. He has the UEFA Pro license because he made it in England, working under Slaven Bilic at West Ham. So I think that he's more of an unknown even than, a new coach who hasn't been a head coach in the Bundesliga would be. So, I don't know what's going to happen, and certainly Bremen don't either.
No, and the problem is when Dortmund screwed up in Bremen, that was already Bremen in poor form. So that's also not an indicator of what's to happen now. But with all that being said, Matthias, let's focus a little bit more on the bigger picture and zoom out of Werder Bremen. Dortmund are obviously now on the search of a new head coach, and maybe in summer's time they will extend Edin Terzic's contract because he's done an outstanding job, and they feel that the guy from 30 kilometers away from Dortmund ends up being the right fit. Obviously they are linked with the Nagelsmanns and Roses of the world. But before we actually discuss names, what I would say Dortmund right now need is a coach that can build a team that's maybe greater than the sum of its parts again, and have a spark and actually follow the philosophy that's being dictated by the club. And we have previously criticized that with the eclectic choice of coaches and different philosophies, that it's not entirely clear what Dortmund really want to be. So this now, as I said in the intro, is also a little bit about the legacy of Michael Zorc and Hans-Joachim Watzke, and I think starting to be the legacy also of Sebastian Kehl. And this club really needs to know what it wants to be and who the person they should bring in to deliver that sort of picture. So Matthias, who, from your perspective, from the fan perspective, and from the identity of the club, who or what should Dortmund be on the field? What should they represent? And after you answered that question, which I'm sure is very easy, then you can pick a head coach and who could maybe fit that criteria.
Yes, of course. It's all so easy. I mean, what Dortmund wants to be, you have to kind of go back to 2008. And when you look at Jürgen Klopp, he was clearly identified from a club that was fighting against relegation in Mainz. And they saw in him what they wanted Dortmund to be, because we can't forget, before that we had Thomas sorry, couldn't even say it. Thomas Doll. That was actually just a coincidence. Choked on my own coffee. And that was where they wanted. And that's where it developed and drove them, because you just said something so key. Better than the sum of its parts. There is no statement that better sums up what Dortmund were in the 2 title-winning seasons and the double-winning season and getting to the Champions League season than that, because Dortmund played teams off of the park that were from a quality standpoint way better. I mean, Kevin Grosskreutz versus Real Madrid. I mean, give me a break.
Oliver Kirch, Marcel Schmelzer.
Oliver Kirch. I mean, just Ramos. I mean, people forget we had a striker named Lucas Barrios. I mean, and even this young kid from Poland nobody had heard about, named Lewandowski. So that's where Dortmund need to be, like you said. I think that's the philosophy they want. If you look at the coaches that came out of Dortmund's youth and under 23s to go on and coach in other places, they all played that brand of football. That is what they brought to Norwich, Huddersfield, Huddersfield again, and if you kind of go along those lines, you can see that that's what they want to bring from the youth up. But where Dortmund went off the rails was obviously the season where Dortmund were in a relegation spot under Jürgen Klopp, where he then resigned. And lo and behold, you had Thomas Tuchel there, who was at the time the hottest regarded entity in German coaching. And so them hiring him naturally made sense. And in the beginning, he still kind of played a lot in that, high intensity pressing. And then it eventually kind of went away from that. And then, of course, him being him. And then they brought Bosch in, who obviously wasn't first choice, but kind of played that high tempo, extreme aggressive pressing type style. It obviously miraculously backfired, also because of player acquisition. Stöger was just, we need somebody. Favre was a little bit of, we need somebody to at least stabilize. But I think that right there is the club DNA that they want to represent, because that's what represents the passion of the Ruhrgebiet. That it's the passion of your Dortmund supporters. They want that aggression. They want that high tempo. They want the entertainment. This plodding, patient, ball shuffling back and forth, side to side, and then back to the back. It just doesn't get under their skin. And Watzke and Zorc are from the area. I mean, Zorc is like the ultimate Borussia Dortmund guy. And that's really what they want to see. And so I think that is the direction that they have to go with a coach. I think Terzic is it right now because he kind of embodies it, and it's a safe bet for them at this point, rather than a Stöger or somebody like that. And then as far as names go, even though I love Pochettino, because as a Spurs supporter, you kind of have to, because he did what Favre did there in writing them, but not winning anything at the end, even though getting really close. But that's utopic. His name is being linked with people like PSG, Real Madrid, and Manchester United. That's just a level above Dortmund, at least from a pay grade international standpoint. I don't care about the not speaking German thing. He didn't speak English when he started at Tottenham, so I'm not worried about that. The most natural choice is the one that everyone is linking, and that's Marco Rose. There's a reason why Max Eberl, immediately came out and said, Rose is under contract, but then also said, but if he wants to leave, there's nothing we can do about it. And Rose's contract ends in 2022. So in all reports are really linking there, and supposedly he wouldn't say no to it. Also because he's of that Klopp Mainz DNA. So that is the most natural fit. But of course, if Terzic becomes the next Hansi Flick, then why change anything? But that's, I would say, rather unlikely at this point.
Yeah, same task to you, Lars. Take a look into the crystal ball and tell me what you see or what you hope to see.
Honestly, I think it's an academic debate, because I think it's pretty much a given that Marco Rose is going to sign with Dortmund. He has a release clause in his contract. They were already quite interested in him, as we know, as an alternative to Favre in 2018, when he was back at Salzburg and slapped Peter Stöger's Dortmund side in the Europa League.
I gotta say, it still hurts. It really still hurts. And I went to the away game, and Salzburg is a pretty city, and I can only recommend the trip and seeing the Alps. But the evening at the Red Bull, whatever the heck arena, just god awful. That was maybe one of Dortmund's absolute worst performances under Peter Stöger. Ugh. All right, just continue. Sorry, I just need to. Ugh.
Yeah, and I mean, I think basically since that evening in Salzburg, and I mean, Salzburg even outplayed Dortmund by a considerable margin at the Westfalenstadion too. I think it's kind of felt, at least to me, like they were destined to meet up at some point. And, you know, with his release clause, with him having spent 2 years by then at Gladbach, you know, I think taking them out of that Champions League group is basically as far as you can get with Gladbach. I mean, that's an absolutely humongous achievement in a group with Inter, Real Madrid, and even Shakhtar Donetsk, who are a really quite experienced side in European competition. So I think it's such a natural, logical step for all parties involved that even though Gladbach, want to keep him, obviously, because he's a really good coach, I think it's basically not going to happen. So I think they more or less have a pretty decent idea that they're going to get Rose. I think otherwise perhaps they wouldn't have given the job now to Terzic, because I don't think this is an audition for a permanent head coaching role, just because, as I said before, he's been an assistant coach for nigh on 10 years now, and basically that means you're probably going to be an assistant coach for most of your career. I mean, there's the case of Uwe Neuhaus, who's now a Bundesliga coach at Bielefeld, a really likable guy who used to be an assistant at Dortmund, coaching the under-23s then, and became the leading guy. But it's usually not happening, and I think it's kind of silly to always point to Hansi Flick, because he was a head coach at Hoffenheim for 5 years when Hoffenheim weren't really Hoffenheim, but still, I mean, they eliminated Bayer Leverkusen in the first round of the Cup, one of those seasons when Hoffenheim were in the third or fourth division. And obviously Flick also, he wasn't the assistant coach to Slaven Bilic at Besiktas, but to Joachim Löw when they won the World Cup. I think that's a bit more of an endorsement, if you like. As I said, I think it's going to be Rose. I think Dortmund think it's going to be Rose, but just to throw two more names out there in case something goes awry. I mean, what if Rose suddenly decides to stay at Gladbach or gets offered, I don't know, the Manchester City job for whatever reason because they eliminate Man City out of the Champions League.
Well, then Pep Guardiola's free.
I think Matthias Sammer would advocate for Erik ten Hag of Ajax. I think it's been well reported that he very much likes him from days they spent together at Bayern when Ten Hag was their under-23 coach. Sammer wanted to sign Ten Hag to the German FA at some point also, before then even. He speaks German. He's presumably taken Ajax as far as he can, but I think it's almost racial profiling. But I mean, do they really want to sign another bald-headed Dutch guy from Ajax?
Yes, bald guy to Electric Boogaloo.
Relatively soon after Bosch? I don't think so. And I think Rose is the perfect match for both sides. But if, as I said, that doesn't happen, I think my personal favorite would be Ralf Hasenhüttl of Southampton. He's doing a mega job at Saints, but I mean, he's basically running a sort of one-man show there and has a long-term contract. He's taking them to Europe this season, I'm convinced, so I don't think he's gonna leave them, but I think that would be much like Rose because they have somewhat similar backgrounds, starting at lower league sides, working their way up to the Red Bull Imperium, which obviously isn't necessarily a positive when it comes to Dortmund. But if we looked at it from a neutral, just focusing on football kind of thing, then, going through the Red Bull school isn't necessarily the worst thing for a head coach. So, Hasenhüttl would be my 1B to Marco Rose as the 1A.
And I'll 100% endorse that. And can I just put in one thing real quick to all American Dortmund fans? Please stop mentioning Jesse Marsch. For the love of God, please stop mentioning someone who's underperforming with the most overpowered side in Austria. Please. Anyway, go on.
I just wanted to say that Jesse Marsch... Yeah, Matthias, so let's, as we close this out, talk just very briefly about what's sort of expected of Terzic / his minimum requirement, because Dortmund are obviously 6 points off the lead in the Bundesliga table, but they are also not in the top 4. So is it just for Dortmund to securing somehow the top 4 spots, or do you still think that Dortmund should shake themselves a little and then hope that they can somehow climb to the top of the Bundesliga?
Well, I think obviously the minimum is Champions League, just financially. But I think Dortmund will do that. I think they also have the quality to be second or third, and at minimum. So I think the bar is going to be set relatively low, and so that the pressure isn't as extreme. But you've got to finish top 4. I think Dortmund will progress as far as you can in the cup. Even though that's, I would say, definitely more in the tertiary level of concern. And then secondary in the Champions League, you do have a somewhat favorable tie against Sevilla, who, having watched Sevilla recently, Lopetegui seems a little flustered, let's just say. And the results they lost to Eibar. So I think progressing past Sevilla and finishing top 4 would be kind of the minimum that they're going to put on the young coach.
Yeah, it's good that you brought Sevilla up because it was the last point here on my sheet. So Terzic already talked about the infamous game at Sevilla back in the day when Dortmund fans were attacked by the police and ball boys not showing up. It was really infamous, and it's one of my most painful experiences because I was just filled with hate and rage afterwards. So I really do want revenge. Lars, what do you make of this draw against these, I think, 5th place team in Spain right now with a couple games in hand?
Was it Sevilla where Marcel Schmelzer got sent off by Willy Collum for absolutely nothing, or was that another?
It was Mike Dean, and it was the first leg.
Okay.
Yes, still painful.
Yeah, I mean, having watched Sevilla last in the Europa League final against Inter, where I think they merited winning the competition again, I think this is the kind of team that from a talent standpoint Dortmund are probably a bit favored against, but I think they have what Dortmund sometimes lack, and that is, the last 5% to, I think they said today, I think it was Zorc, to play for a result and get that result. I mean, it's not always pretty. It's probably not often pretty when Sevilla are involved, but they kind of get the job done. A veteran side with all the slight tricks of veterans. Even I think there's kind of a feeling that they have a certain type of player, and when he comes to Sevilla, he becomes even more of a shithouse. So I think this is basically a toss-up. I mean, obviously we don't really know what Dortmund are going to be under Terzic, and especially in like 2.5 months or whenever the first leg is. So on paper, I think Dortmund would be favored to progress into the quarterfinal most times, but I mean, Sevilla definitely not pushovers, and I honestly would have preferred playing against Barcelona because they look completely disheveled under Koeman, and even in the Champions League, I mean, they lost 3-0 at home to Juventus, who really aren't all that under Andrea Pirlo themselves. So I think Barca would have been a more interesting draw and more favorable draw for Dortmund, obviously also just because watching Messi at the Westfalenstadion again would be nice.
Yeah, true. Very well said. Matthias, I think now it's time to knock it on the head, and you may tell the people A, how to follow you on Twitter, and B, what the prediction for the Bremen game is.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter against my better judgment at Matthias Suk, and probably against your better judgment. As far as the result in this match, I do believe we will see a reaction. It's not going to be necessarily a pretty one, but it'll be there, and I'm going to say Dortmund win this thing 2-1.
All right, Lars, same task for you.
Without any comment on your or my judgment, you can follow me on Twitter at Lars Pollmann, and I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw.
Very well, yeah. I'm also not really convinced whether we will see such a big change of Dortmund, but I still think they will do enough to win it. So I'm going with a 2-1 win. And you can follow me at Stefan Butzko, and you can, of course, follow all of us at Yellowwallpod. And for our written content, you can go to theyellowwall.net. And if you want to subscribe or contribute financially, you can go to patreon.com/theyellowwall, where you can sponsor episodes, etc. And of course, you can subscribe to the podcast via YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, etc. And since this is another English week where Dortmund play on Tuesday and then on Friday, we will already be back on either Wednesday or Thursday. Anywho, as always, thank you for listening. Until next time, goodbye.